Have you ever heard of the problem known in philosophy as the problem of evil? This is one of the main well-known problems in all of philosophy, where people like David Hume, John Locke, and Bertrand Russell have talked about this problem extensively. So in this video, we're going to talk about the problem of evil, and then I'm going to give my points of view on why I think this problem is not indeed a problem. So this is going to be an interesting exploration, and the reason why I actually wanted to talk about this is because I think it could branch one's thought process into a lot of different places. So the main idea that the problem of evil puts forward is that how can there be a benevolent God, an all-loving God, which is the conventional view of God when it comes to most religions. So how can there be such God, and then at the same time suffering exists? Like, those two do not go with each other, therefore they contradict each other, therefore religion is not true, or God is not true. So that's the main tenet of the problem of evil. Now, there may be other details that perhaps I didn't mention, but that's the main tenet of the argument of the quote-unquote problem of evil.
Any God who would allow children by the millions to suffer and die in this way, and their parents to grieve in this way, either can do nothing to help them or doesn't care to. He is therefore either impotent or evil.
Now, the reason why I think the problem of evil does not really hold strong against conventional ideas of God or conventional ideas of religion is because I think the problem of evil at the heart of it is really an emotional argument rather than an objective one, because we can all know that suffering is usually multidimensional when it comes to our approach towards it as humans, which is why I think it takes a one-dimensional view on suffering. Now, I would argue this point from three main angles. The first is that we can prove that there is a lot of suffering that's actually good. So, for example, exercise is suffering to a lot of people, but it seems to me like the consequences of that suffering are to a degree worth it for most people. So we could actually argue that there is good suffering, which dispels the idea of the problem of evil at the first instance. The second is that we cannot really claim that suffering is not the most wise outcome. So what I mean by that is, if let's imagine a world without any suffering, without any stressors, do you think the human consciousness could actually emerge from lack of stressors? It seems to me like the fundamental function of the human consciousness is to actually avoid stressors or suffering to a degree, which seems to me to prove that the idea of suffering the idea of consciousness requires a lot of stressors or suffering in order to actually emerge. And also, to expand and emphasize upon that point, there is an idea called Antifragility, which is purported by author Nassim Taleb. What he mentions is that actually the complex systems that we see around us, such as nature or humans or animals or plants, all those different systems actually flourish when they get subjected to stressors, which is also known as suffering for humans. So all these things allude to the fact that complex systems such as humans actually flourish with the idea of suffering, even though at the first instance it seems like there's nothing good that could come out of it. But once we flesh the emotional argument out of the picture, it seems like we could see that multidimensional angle of suffering once again. Now, that is the second angle where we can kind of disprove the problem of evil as conflicting with the conventional ideas of God. Now, the third angle we can actually tackle this from is for you to imagine the things you do on a daily basis. Now, count how many of them are actually done to more or less avoid suffering. Now, as soon as we see that suffering is actually fundamental to a lot of the things we do, then by extension, we see that a lot of the things we respect as humans are actually done because of suffering in and of itself. So it seems to me like that thing, suffering, could be argued to be the most wise outcome for human beings. Now, of course, suffering for individuals is not something that's perhaps favorable, especially in specific contexts or circumstances, but that doesn't disprove those ideas of it being the most wise outcome. Now, we can also say that a lot of institutions we actually respect, such as science, for instance, seems to be fundamental to the idea of avoiding suffering, which is one other way to argue the third angle we actually discussed. So the idea of science emerged, or the idea of progress in and of itself emerged for humans to actually make life, I guess, less sufferable, if that makes sense. So it seems to me like if we remove suffering from the pictures, most things of the human psyche, or the things we respect as humans, would collapse. So as soon as we see those multi-dimensional angles of looking at suffering, we see that it could give or bring or give rise to a lot of things we actually respect as humans. So it seems to me like this argument of the problem, or this problem of evil, is not indeed a problem once we look at the details of the arguments and see the multi-dimensional view of suffering. So with that, we conclude. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this video beneficial. Please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you actually find this content beneficial. And for more philosophical ideas and psychological ideas and also different conversations and podcasts, please subscribe to the channel. See you next time.